So today we're going to take a look at a way to create an engaging mobile app with NativeScript and Vue.js. And if you're like me, I'm sure you are, at VueNYC, you're a Vue leaver, and we love to have a lot of fun with this awesome framework. And now we have the capability to create mobile apps using Vue.js. So this is a really exciting moment in time for a lot of us mobile developers. But before I start, I kind of like to interrupt myself by talking about a project that I launched, and it's called VueVixens. You can find this on the web at viewvixens.org. And what it is it's modeled after Django girls and MG girls in the Angular community. So what we do is we have free day-long workshops, and we also create lunch and learns and breakfasts, kind of in parallel with conferences, so that women and people who identify as women can come and learn around in a nice roundtable format and a nice supportive environment how to build for web and mobile with Vue.js. So this is a new program that I started. We're creating a scholarship fund to help get underrepresented people to come to these conferences. We had our first event at VueUS. You saw some of the videos from VueUS, I think. We had a blast. It was just a lot of fun. We had a breakfast with about 10 women, and we made so much noise, people were kind of getting jealous. So it was great fun. So if you'd like to take a look at this project, I'd love your feedback. We're working on the workshop content right now. Okay, so who am I? My name is Jen Looper. I'm a senior developer advocate at Progress. And for this talk, I always like to mention that I'm actually an ex-French teacher. I have a PhD in medieval French. My specialty was 13th century prose romance. So if you have any questions about Arthurian romance and really, really long and boring books that were written in the 13th century, then I'm your person for that. But long story short, times have changed. My career path took a little turn, and now I'm talking about Vue on stage and at cool meetups like this one. But I also co-founded the Walls of Chinese Language School, and I just like to mention that because I have this passion kind of that's simmering on the side for second language acquisition. I really am interested in how people learn second languages, and this always kind of trickles into the things that I do now. So speaking of second languages, let's talk about NativeScript. So I think you might have already had some talks about NativeScript and the Vue.js interaction with NativeScript, interface with NativeScript. But I'm just going to remind you, if you haven't heard, what is NativeScript? Well, it's actually a framework for building native cross-platform mobile apps, and it gives you this no-compromise, smoothly animating native mobile apps for iOS and Android. So these are the downloadable mobile apps. You go to the App Store and you can download an app called Examples NativeScript. It's for iOS and Android, and you can take a look at how the interface feels. It's a truly native app, and you're writing JavaScript to create this app. So it's kind of a really interesting and fun way to build mobile apps. And the cool thing about this particular app is that there's a little tab, and you can see the code behind that was used to build the layouts. I think that's kind of a really cool way to learn, kind of like behind the scenes view. So I work at booths a lot, and I have a lot of conversations with developers. And when I say that I represent NativeScript, I get some side eye sometimes. People get a little bit worried that they have to learn yet another front-end language. Well, that's actually not the case. If you know JavaScript, you know NativeScript. And all it is basically using JavaScript, CSS, and XML to construct the app. And a lot of people also give me side-eye about XML, but it's really just like HTML markup. It's really straightforward. And you just need to use that to create layouts in NativeScript because they are being transpiled to create native UI. But basically, if you know JavaScript, if you know CSS3, if you like to use NPM packages, if you happen to like Angular or enjoy using Sass, you're going to be able to create a nice NativeScript app. If you use Angular and Vue, you're also going to leverage Webpack. That's the little hexagon logo to the right there. That's going to be a very useful tool for you as you write. And then you can also use TypeScript. You can use TypeScript with or without Angular. And we're working on TypeScript plus Vue plus NativeScript right now, so this is kind of a project that's coming soon. But you have all of these options to build your NativeScript app, and we always like to say, if you want to use React, you're going to want to use React Native. But if you don't want to use React and you want to just use no framework or Angular or TypeScript, then NativeScript might be a really good choice for you. And now we have a very beautiful implementation with Vue.js. And this is really a cool new thing that I love to give talks about. I get pretty excited about it. So Vue plus NativeScript is a lot of love. Now, why would you go ahead and choose Vue as a framework with which to write a mobile app? Well, Vue, like Angular 2, Vue adopted a virtual DOM, and it enables native mobile rendering. So once you decouple the DOM, and you don't depend on DOM manipulation, like Angular 2 and Vue have decided architecturally to do, then you can go ahead and write mobile apps because you can start writing that native UI interface on top of the JavaScript that you would normally use. So that's a really helpful little architectural decision that both of these frameworks made and allows us to use this with NativeScript. And Vue also gives this kind of great way for web developers to use their skills that they've already developed over time and embrace mobile platforms. Weeks actually beat us to the punch a little bit. I don't know if you know about Weeks, but it's a framework that was built by Alibaba. And they have a pretty decent integration that they use a lot. A lot of Chinese developers are very familiar. And that's both a strength and a weakness because a lot of the documentation is actually in Chinese, so it's a little hard to dive deeply into Weeks unless you're pretty entrenched in that ecosystem. But because they open source Weeks, we were able to get some tips and some kind of pointers on how to use Vue with NativeScript. So we do like to call out Weeks as standing on the shoulders of giants. Very helpful project for us. Vue is also beautifully lightweight. It's highly appropriate for mobile. I really like to call this out because Angular is a little bit heavier framework, but Vue has this very light feeling and light on the kilobytes. It's great for mobile. And then it has this terrific code sharing potential that I also like to talk about. And I'll be talking a little bit later in this talk about some of the options that we have now. If you have your website built in Vue, maybe you could share some of that code and use it to build your mobile app. So it's really a cool and fun potentiality. So let's talk a little bit about how NativeScript works with Vue. Well, NativeScript is actually a custom implementation of Vue, and it kind of lies right in between Vue.js and NativeScript, allowing NativeScript to be built with Vue.js. So it adds some of the special mobile touches that we need so that you can handle things like the Android back button and some of the fancy things you need in the action bar on iOS. And what you're going to do in your code base is instead of importing Vue from Vue, like you do on the web, you just import Vue from NativeScript to Vue in your NativeScript app. So you're just going to use this custom implementation. So that's the first basic difference between writing for web versus writing for mobile using Vue. Another basic difference is how you bootstrap your app. So in a web interface, you would go ahead and always have that element into which you're going to inject your code. A lot of times you have the element with the div with the ID app, and you inject the whole app basically is injected into this div. Well, in NativeScript, we don't do any kind of DOM manipulation. There is no DOM to manipulate anyway, so you don't have to inject anything anywhere. You just go ahead and you start your instance of Vue, and then you just render it. So you just start that thing right up, and then it just gets going. And the final difference that you're going to see, that you're going to notice right away, is the difference in templating. You're going to find that you use standard DOM elements, like this is a Vuetify app that I use, so I use V cards, that's a Vuetify markup. But I also use H1s and Ps and divs in my web interface. Then in my NativeScript template, I have things like stack layouts and labels, absolute layouts, and the standard kind of NativeScript way of handling layouts. So that is going to be the three main differences, and this is the biggest one. You're going to have to kind of figure out how your layouts are going to look on mobile. So, my first NativeScript Vue app, how would I go about trying out NativeScript in this context? Well, a great way to try is to click on play.nativescript.org, go to that website. It's called our NativeScript Playground. To use it, you're going to have to download a couple of apps from the App Store. One is called Viewer, and the other is called, I think, Play, the NativeScript Playground app. And you're going to be prompted to download those apps once you start playing in the playground. And you can start doing it right now, actually. So I've created a little playground for us. Let's see, this is actually not the one I wanted to show. It's 9. Here we go. So I'm going to mirror my phone here using QuickTime. Come on. Okay, new movie recording. This is a little cheat. Oh, here we go. I'm going to mirror my iPhone. Hello, iPhone. No, I don't want a podcast. Not right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and hit preview, and it's going to give me this QR code. So I'm going to show you what this looks like. So I'm going to find my Playground app and scan this QR code. There it goes. Okay, so here we have an idea. Let me just shrink this a little bit so you can see both at the same time. Okay. So you can see how here I have an app that was built with Vue, and I'm starting to tinker around with some of these funky layouts that's going on here. I have a little seal and an image and a little label, and the stack layout. I also have an action bar here, and if I start making changes in my action bar, you can find that NativeScript Live Sync is going to say, hello, NYC. I just save it. It should refresh nicely, and you can see the changes immediately. So it's a really nice, clean way to kind of get a feel for how it feels to develop with NativeScript and Vue. And you can also do things like dragging buttons here. And the button should appear right in the middle of my screen very attractively. And this is kind of nice because it also is going to bring it in a little bit right here, so it's looking for the @tab on button tab, and it already just imported a little bit of code here so that I can start tinkering on the method. So if I click on the button on my iPhone, let's see. Oh yes, so it's going to be in the logs here, so it's going to start saying button was pressed, so you can get your console logs down here. So this is kind of a nice integrated way to play and test your NativeScript applications. So that is really cool, and I strongly recommend that everybody take a look at the Playground. But the big girl way of dealing of trying NativeScript and Vue together is to actually use our new NativeScript Vue CLI template. And once you have the Vue CLI installed, you can start using this template to create your apps. So I have started up a project here. CD to my desktop, and I'm just going to create a project called My App. Now, hotel Wi-Fi, we'll just see what happens. So it's going to start downloading the template. It's going to ask me a couple of pre-install questions. So I'm going to give it the name My App. I'm going to call it, it's going to be basically just keeping the defaults here. Normally I would change it to com.ladiesfirstmedia, but that's okay. Project version is fine, author is fine, license is fine. Now, here I have some interesting choices to make. I'm not going to use the Vue router because I prefer to use manual routing, but I am going to use VueNYC. I wish I could see a show of hands what color you'd like me to install. I'm going to use purple. There we go. Okay, so CD, my app. And then I'm going to do an install. And this is actually what takes a little bit of time on hotel Wi-Fi. So you're just going to install these dependencies. And then I will just get ready to close my phone and try to install this right on my phone once it decides to do an Xcode build. So if this takes too long, I'll just keep talking and show you the experience as we go. Just give it a couple seconds here. A lot of extraction going on, but this is the initial installation of dependencies. And the first time you do this, of course, is going to take a little bit longer. Okay, great. So now I'm going to do an npm run watch iOS. And it should start building right to my phone, doing a full Xcode build. You can do this doing it on Android, npm run watch Android, and use your Android emulators, or it's a little faster for me actually on my Mac to use an Android device, but I didn't pack it, and I don't have the charger, so we'll just do it on my iPhone. With this particular template, you can actually run them both in tandem, so you can do iOS and Android at the same time. So that's actually a really cool and kind of mind-blowing way of developing. But the same live syncing that you saw in the Playground actually occurs on your device or in your emulator as well. So here comes the Xcode build. and it's going to try to install it right to my phone. Let's see, just mirror my phone. Again, I have a lot of stuff on this phone. Elements. So, take the next code build here. Okay. Make sure my phone is up and pay attention. I'm not loving the failed Xcode build, but let's see if we get past it. You'll probably hear my Mac. My Mac is heating up. This Mac is getting a little bit tired. Awful lot of Xcode builds. I'm going to go ahead and keep talking, and we'll see if this decides to succeed, then I will show you what it looks like. Okay. So speaking of building, what if you wanted to move past, just building in the playground, you're building something simple with a CLI, and you wanted to build something that was actually really cool. So what I ended up doing actually is building a full product for this talk, which I've given in Amsterdam and a couple other places. And I didn't quite mean to, but that's what it kind of turned out, because what I realized is that not only could I learn Vue, I could also kind of use this interest that I have in teaching second language acquisition by building a Vue app that would help language teachers. So that's what I built. And the app that I built is called Elocute. And if you go to elocute.me, it looks like this. And it is an app for language teachers and their students. And the idea behind this app is actually that you're able to replace the language lab. I came up in high school in the 80s when we had these really clunky kind of cubes that you'd sit around and speak, practice your language skills in these kind of dreadful blind cubes, almost like cassette tapes. It was really incredible. And I don't really think we've progressed too far beyond this. I think people are still speaking to their computers and trying to get some kind of language practice with these devices. And I just feel like this is literally the worst way to learn a language without having, nice solid feedback that you can get from your teacher that's kind of instantaneous. So I wanted to build a website for teachers and a mobile app for their students. So in Elocute, you go ahead, and this is all done in Vue, but you log in as a teacher, and you start inviting students. So you search for students who have already registered into the mobile app. They have an account there, and you invite them into your classrooms that you create. So here I have a Dutch 101 classroom. Let's say I'm a Dutch teacher. I invite my students in, and then I create a roster. And to that roster, I add an assignment. And I give these students texts that they can practice. So instead of sitting around in the library in some weird cube speaking into a speaker, a student can whip out their phone, pull up the app, and test how close their language acquisition has gotten. Because what's going on in the mobile app is they're taking these little snippets of foreign language, and they're speaking them. And the NativeScript mobile app makes use of the speech-to-text plugin. So people are able to see how close their linguistic utterance is to what their teacher has given them to study. So I'm going to demo how good my Dutch has gotten since I spoke in Vue Amsterdam. Okay, so the student would go ahead and log in, like I said, and they see their classrooms. So here the student has a Dutch 101 classroom, and they see the assignment, they click on the assignment, and they're told what to say. They click the start button, they speak into it, and the text is transcribed according to what the phone thinks they're saying, what the speech-to-text plugin thinks that they're saying. And then an algorithm compares what the teacher has written to what the student has just transcribed and gets a grade instantaneously. So this was a really fun app to build. And so I wanted to just give you some idea of what I used to build the web app. So to build the web app, I use the Vue CLI. I use Vuetify, which is a fantastic component library. I really like it a lot. I use a Firebase UI for authentication, really quick way to get logins kind of cleanly done on the web. That's a really helpful little library because this whole thing is run out of Firebase. I used Vuex for state management, and that was a lot of pleasure because it's a really nice way to handle your state throughout the app. And then, like I said, this is a Firebase-backed app. So the mobile app, On the mobile side, I used the NativeScript CLI. I used a little bit older Webpack template, not the template that I just tried to show you all of the Xcode build went a little bit berserk. So I'm rebuilding this app, and if you go to the GitHub repository where you're going to find the mobile app, you'll see 2 versions of the mobile app. But the one I'm going to talk about is this Webpack template that I used. I used the NativeScript Vue plugin, like I just mentioned. So built the app using Vue. I also used VueNYC on the mobile side for state management, worked beautifully, and also used Firebase because I'm kind of most familiar with Firebase on the back end. So I wanted to show you some similarities and differences of how the web app looked and how the mobile app looked. So as I mentioned before, there is that basic difference. I always imported Vue from NativeScript Vue instead of from Vue itself on the web. I did make a couple of changes on between web and mobile for the router. So you'll notice that I have page routing set to true on mobile, and this allowed me to handle some of the funky stuff on mobile, like the Android back button, like I mentioned. It also handles the ability to go back and forth page to page in your mobile app. But you're going to use the same sort of strategy of metadata via the router. So if you need to protect your routes with some kind of guarding, you can always use requires auth equals true on web and mobile. And then there's some special touches that you can use on mobile in this metadata, like the hidden action bar being true. For example, on your login, you don't want to see the action bar. It always wants to be kind of a plain page. And if you happen to log out, you never want to see that, so the action bar always has to hide. So that sort of stuff is supported for the router with NativeScript Vue. And this is my favorite slide because it shows the similarities between web and mobile in your use of VueNYC. And there basically is no difference whatsoever. It's really the same. And this is a huge win, I think, that we can use VueNYC on mobile just exactly the same as we use on the web. A bigger difference actually came into play with Firebase. On the web, I used plain standard JavaScript Firebase library to handle, the data transferring for Firebase. But on mobile, I needed to use the NativeScript Firebase plugin, which was built by Eddie Verbruchen. And the syntax is a little bit more verbose. He has another version of this plugin that is a little more similar to the syntax on the web. So in the future, I think that I might be able to kind of sync the syntax a little bit better. But right now, you're going to need to use this plugin and kind of differentiate your code. In terms of styling, there are also some differences between web and mobile. So on the web, because I used Vuetify, it's using stylus. So I needed to go ahead and handle that with this little bit different types of styles. But on mobile, I used the core theme that NativeScript gives you, and I also have different types of things that I needed to style. For example, the action bar, which doesn't even exist on the web. So your styling is always going to look a little bit different. But on NativeScript, you're using basic CSS styling with some helpers. So that is a lot of fun. And then this is, of course, that big difference on the web. You're going to have this really different looking layout. Here I use, let's see what this is. This is like the home page of Elocute and me on the web. So I use markup like VFlex and VLayouts and VCards and VAvatars. And that is all coming from Vuetify. On mobile, I have things like stack layouts and grid layouts. So this is the welcome page on mobile, and it does look a lot different. So you do need to kind of handle that. So this is the moment in time where I do a little demo. So I'm going to just show you what Elocute looks like, what it feels like on mobile. And let me open up my app and show you the screen. Quick time. Okay, here we go. So this is Elocute. This is all coming out of Firebase, and I logged in as a student. And here are my classrooms. So here's Dutch 101. So let's see if I can remember how to pronounce this interesting little poem. It's a poem about a kitty cat, and it's very simple. It's actually a little song that every Dutch child knows. And it's, kitty cat, come here, I have delicious milk for you. And for me, I have rice pudding. Oh, what a happy time we're going to have together. Something like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the app, speak into my device, stop the app, and get a score of how close my utterance was. So let's see. All right, here goes. 扑是猫，好面草， Ik heb lekkere melk voor jou. Eén voor mij, rijstbrei. Oh, wat heerlijk schmollen wij. I have a bad feeling. Hey, I'm really rusty. Okay, I need practice. So, but the cool thing is that, you know, that's pretty accurate. That was a pretty lousy take on my part. So, maybe I should do the French one. Anyway, see if I can. Anyway, but that is the basic feel of the app, and you can kind of go back and forth and find your classes and find your utterances, and get your scores, and get feedback from your teacher. So my great product, and I know I'm going to make $1 million off of this thing, so it's going to be great. But anyway, that's Elocute. So what I wanted to do now is take a few minutes to talk about where we're going with this project in the future. And one of the great things we're looking at is how to handle actual code sharing. So what I just showed you is basically 2 projects. I wrote Elocute for the web, and then I wrote a completely separate mobile app. If you look at the repo, the code bases are in completely separate folders. So they really don't have any kind of realistic code sharing, even though this talk is ostensibly about code sharing. So I'm going to talk about code sharing now. So we do have some experience with the best ways to share code. We've been kind of wrangling this for our NativeScript Angular implementation. And we're getting to the point where we're getting a good idea of what the best way to do this is. We're starting to use Angular schematics and that sort of thing on the Angular side, and it's getting pretty complex. So I'm kind of excited to look at what we're doing on the Vue side, because it is kind of beautifully simple and just leverages the heck out of Webpack. So what we have is a kind of work in progress repo, and I'll give you the links at the end of the slides. But you're able to build for iOS, Android, and web in one repo. And I built a little basic app using a list, and it gives a list of types of seals. So the way this repo works is that it has 2 entry points. There's entry for the web and entry for native, for mobile. So here we have, again, this business of requiring Vue, requiring NativeScript Vue, and then launching your app. So here the template is already a little bit different in these 2 endpoints. And you can see on the web, we mount and inject our code into app. And on mobile, we just start it right up. So those are kind of those are the sort of the entry points. And then we converge in app view by forking the 2 templates here for web and mobile. So we have template web with all the divs and the H1s, and then template native with our stack layout. So within app view, you can start already making this differentiation between the 2 types of experiences that you're building within one file. So this is really cool. We're also able to share some of the script done in the script block. Web template, right, native. And then you saw back here that I'm importing the seal gallery, and that is a SFC that also has this forked experience. We have the template for the web and the template for native. And what we have here is an unordered list on the web and a list view on native. So it's kind of a really exciting way to build, and without blowing up the size of your files too much, just let Webpack do its magic. Let it handle the build for native by picking out the bits that it wants to build for native, and let it handle the build for web as well. And there's some important work that we still have yet to do for the NativeScript Vue loader, which is a fork of the Vue loader, and that's going to help us finish up the project once that work is done. So that's kind of what we're working on now. So I just want to kind of give you a little preview of where this project is going. And the main genius behind this whole experience is actually our community contributor. He's a student in Hungary. His name is Igor Rangelovic, and he's our core contributor, and he's the one who has built NativeScript Vue. So if you go to nativescript-vue.org, you'll find all of his work. And we're working on getting the docs really solid. We're working on this particular repo right here, NativeScript Vue. And there's a lot of goodies in this repo. I invite you to take a look. And dank je, as we say in Holland. So thank you so much. Thanks for having me.